First of all, welcome everyone today. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're so grateful that you are able to join us today for what will be the second in a series of NACADA virtual town halls sponsored by the Board of Directors as well as the Council. These events are meant to be an extension of the town hall gathering that happens at the annual conference. Our topic of discussion today is diversity, inclusion, and engagement. But before we get to that, I'd like for you to meet our panel. My name is Shannon Lynn Burton, and I'm the Associate University Ombudsperson at Michigan State University, and I am a member of the Board of Directors. I'll have my colleagues introduce themselves in the order you see them on the slide. We'll start with Carrie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Kincannon. I'm the Director of University Exploratory Studies Program at Oregon State University, and I'm helping to moderate the panel today.
Hello, my name is Michelle Smith-Ware, and I am from the University of Notre Dame, where I work in the first year of studies and co-direct the Balfour-Hesburgh Scholars Program, and I am also chair of the Inclusion and Engagement Committee within NACADA.
Hello, my name is Cecilia Olivares. I'm the Senior Student Services Coordinator at the University of Missouri, and I'm currently serving on the NACADA Council as an Admin Division Representative.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Kofer. It's listed as Rebecca Daly Kofer, but Rebecca Kofer. I am in South Georgia, Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College. We just call it ABAC. And I'm a tutor coordinator and an academic support counselor here. And I serve as the formerly CIG Commission and Interest Group Division, newly restructured and named Advising Communities Division Rep.
And hi, everyone. I'm Karen Archambault. I'm the Dean of Enrollment Management at Rowan College at Burlington County in New Jersey, and I am a member of the Board of Directors as well as your current Vice President.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So here is a look at our agenda for today. While you note from the first three items that we have some explanatory material that we will present at the top, this is meant to be a participatory event. If you look at the bottom of the screen that is framing our content, you will notice a Q&A button. As we are presenting, and certainly when we get to the discussion section of the town hall, we invite you to submit questions via this channel. Carrie will be moderating those questions and framing them for our discussion. I also want to draw your attention to the website that accompanies this NACADA event. A link to the site went out with the invite to this event. You see the URL on your screen, as well as a screenshot of the page. On that site, you will see a link to a Google form. We will be keeping this form open until February 2nd, 2018. We invite you to use this form to submit additional comments and questions that you want to share with the board. This event is being recorded and will be shared with the broader membership, so those who cannot join us today have the opportunity to hear the discussion and share their thoughts via this Google form as well. I also want to note that you do not need to have a Google account to access this form. So, why are we gathering around this topic today? The board and council have invested a good deal of time thinking about how to assess and expand the organization's efforts around diversity and inclusion. This town hall gives us an opportunity to shine a light on this specific goal in fostering inclusive practices within the association, share with you, the membership, examples of benchmarks and measurements that have been established for diversity and inclusion, as well as provide our community with a chance to offer questions, comments, and feedback. Here are the three learning outcomes we hope to achieve today. We want to provide you with information about current NACADA activities around diversity and inclusion, and we want to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions and provide comments and suggestions related to these important initiatives. Here you see our 7 strategic goals. Our first virtual town hall in December examined these goals as a whole. Today, we are really focusing in on goal 4, which is to foster inclusive practices within the association that respect the principle of equity and the diversity of advising professionals across a vast array of intersections of identity. We provide this list to you today as a point of context in helping you to frame this goal among the others. Finally, members who attended the in-person town hall at the annual conference in St. Louis last October were offered a chance to provide feedback regarding diversity and inclusion. Their comments at this meeting centered on three main areas: suggestions for improving efforts, activities the organization could be engaged in to promote this goal, and additional concerns members had in relation to this topic. Many wonderful ideas and thoughts were shared during this brief time together, ranging from an expansion of the awards programs and better communication about leadership opportunities, to expanding types of sessions at conferences and how the organization defines diversity in leadership. We hope that those of you attending today will be open to what our panelists have to offer in their short presentation and provide us with new perspectives and ideas to enhance our efforts moving forward. I will now turn this over to Karen, who will discuss the board and council perspective.
Thanks so much, Shannon. As Shannon mentioned, the board and council have spent quite a bit of time talking about the way that diversity and inclusion are considered within the organization. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with the work that the board and council do, they're really responsible for providing the overarching structure and the vision to the organization. The board in particular is intended to be forward-thinking, thinking about what things could look like, as well as how the rest of the organization's units fit together in meeting those goals. For me, I think about it as a continuum. We know and we often talk about the need for our students to be represented in our profession and to feel seen by the advisors with whom they meet. In the same way, we need our profession to be represented in our membership, to feel like they see people like themselves, and for our membership, by extension, to be represented in our leadership. As the 2016-2017 board thought through the strategic goals and the related benchmarks, we really identified the crucial nature of diversity and inclusion across so many of the strategic goals, not only the specific goal that we're talking about here. But with regard to that specific goal, we recognize that while representation is great, the climate and feel of the organization is just as important, if not more so. It isn't enough to know that there is someone who might share elements of your identity in a position of leadership if you don't believe that those positions are open to you as a whole person with all the salient parts of who you are. The effort behind this strategic goal is that it has to be more than counting heads. There has to be a culture and climate of welcoming and inclusivity that encourages not only membership, but involvement and leadership. So if you've read anything about hiring, you know that there's a significant problem in interviews. People want to bring into their organization those that remind them of themselves, especially when they aren't conscious about their internal biases. So we often talk about bringing people along, but we need to be careful to make sure that they aren't people just like us. The board and council both recognize the need to be intentional, the need to recognize personal identity, institutional type, and all the different factors that make each one of us so valuable as advisors to our students. We need to think about how we expand and highlight the many factors of our own diversity and recognize that there are leaders within the organization, both inside and outside of elected positions. For example, how can we highlight those who lead as authors or as local or regional leaders, but who might not ever make it to a national setting? Part of this work this past year has involved approval of a revised diversity statement for the organization. And so for more on that and the work of the administrative division, I'll hand it off to Cecilia.
Thanks, Karen. Again, I'm Cecilia Olivares, and I am one of the two administrative division representatives for the NACADA Council. To briefly overview our structure within the association, the admin division represents the administrative services of NACADA, which include conferences, institutes, publications, scholarship, and membership experiences. Our 18 committees and advisory boards were established by the board of directors and serve as key players in the diversity, inclusion, and engagement conversation within the association. I want to quickly overview some of the things that we're doing in the admin division across our committees and advisory boards. So first, I'm going to start with the Inclusion Engagement Committee. That group makes recommendations that are regarding inclusion engagement challenges and opportunities within the association. Michelle's actually going to talk about that a little bit more here shortly, but I want to make sure that that leads off because that is certainly a priority group within the association. The Global Initiatives Committee is one of our newer groups within the past few years, and they are working on increasing the contributions of our international membership in conferences, research, and publications, and really expanding our network of relevant associations and organizations and countries throughout the world. The Sustainable NACADA Leadership Committee is doing some exciting work around our new Leadership Academy, and that is going to provide training and support to prospective leaders within the association. I know that they've been very mindful about inclusion, engagement, and accessibility as they develop the structure and the curriculum of that leadership development program. The Emerging Leaders Program Advisory Board oversees our Emerging Leaders Program, which has been in existence since 2007, and we have had 9 graduating classes of emerging leaders over the past several years, and we have 2 more cohorts in progress. And that program is specifically intended to increase leadership from underrepresented membership within the association. And you'll find the ELP graduates at every level of leadership within NACADA. And finally, our Research Committee and Publications Advisory Board have been actively promoting new research and publications from within the membership, which includes diverse perspectives and approaches. I think one of the exciting things that have come out from publications and research is our new NACADA Review, Academic Advising Praxis and Perspectives publication. It's a peer-reviewed online academic journal, and that is going to look at connecting theory and practice throughout the academic advising fields to other relevant fields, and that is going to be looking across the board at diverse populations, programs, and practices. And that's just to highlight a few of the things that we're doing that look at diversity, inclusion, and engagement within the association. One other exciting thing that Karen talked about over the past year is the work that we have done with the revised diversity statement, and that has bled through across all of our groups in terms of what we value and not just what we do. And so the next slide here has that revised statement and talks about what we value and promote in terms of inclusive practices within the association and how that plays into respect and valuing our diverse advising professionals across multiple different identity intersections. So that framework of the diversity statement really is the driving force in what Michelle and her group do with the Inclusion and Engagement Committee, and I will let her talk a little bit more about what they're doing to continue to promote this diversity and inclusion statement throughout the association.
Thank you, Cecilia. I want to start off with a brief history and then talk about some of the tasks that the IEC is working on for this year. The work of the group formerly known as the Diversity Committee began around 2003, and in 2017, the name change was approved by the Board of Directors to the Inclusion and Engagement Committee, or the IEC, to more clearly reflect the mission and the purpose of the committee and its alignment to the association's revised diversity statement, as Cecilia discussed and we saw on the previous slide, which occurred around the same time. Currently, the role of the IEC is to review the status of inclusion and engagement within the association. We recommend methods for enhancing practices within the association related to equity and inclusion, and we advise on how the association can better meet the needs of its diverse membership. Each year, the members of the IEC decide which tasks to focus on. And in the upcoming year, we will be focusing on the following tasks, and I'll give you some examples within each of those. First, we're going to begin a review of the structure of NACADA in relation to the lenses through which the association views inclusion. Specifically, one of the things that we're working on will be a review of how gender identity is viewed in the association and whether or not this view aligns with how gender identity is reflected on the membership application. We will also be assisting the Board of Directors liaisons with tasks and committee work. So more specifically, we have members of the IEC that will be working closely with the Board of Director liaisons on tasks related to their task force and committees. But want to make sure that conversations and decisions that are being made within those task forces and committees are through the lens of inclusion and equity. And finally, we'll be assisting the board of directors specifically with achieving the benchmarks for strategic goal 4. And so within that, we have members of our data subcommittee that are working directly with the chairs of the Research and Global Initiatives Committee to develop a plan to assess inclusivity and equity within the association. So that was a brief history and overview of what the IEC is doing, our role and what we're doing in the upcoming year to foster inclusive practices within the association, which again aligns directly with strategic goal 4. So next, Rebecca will discuss advising communities.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everyone. So nice to see you. When I was thinking about my own perspective on diversity in the association, my mind went immediately to my first official leadership role in the then called Community Commission and Interest Group Division, the CIG. I was the chair of the Advising Students with Disabilities Commission, and I love the experience, and I think that a lot of people don't remember that that is a population that also needs to be included when we're talking about diversity. As I mentioned just briefly, couple times, the CIG, the Commission and Interest Group Division, recently underwent a restructure, and this was made official at annual last year. Huge deal. We became the Advising Communities Division, so we kind of call ourselves the ACD now. Diversity, inclusivity, that was all part of what drove this restructure. One of the goals of the restructure was to best represent our membership through the use of these smaller communities. Which I think, and I have found in my experience, make a very large association like NACADA seem much smaller. So a lot of our members might find their connection with a smaller community and advising community, such as the HBCU, large universities, small colleges and universities. That would be something that I would be interested in. I think the ACD, the Advising Communities Division, allows members from different institution types, advising roles, our professional interests to work together for the association and for our profession. But all that drove our restructure started off with the fact that we wanted to make sure that everyone was included, and that at that point, the CIG we didn't think was as reflective as it should have been of our membership. So currently, at this point in time, I just posted on Facebook for our group, we are working with our chairs to find readers for their communities for the annual conference coming up. I know it seems early, but it'll be here soon. These readers work to make sure that their presentations and their scholarship at annual that reflect their group. So we want to make sure that there are just as quality and as many sessions on, large universities as there are on small colleges and universities. We want to make sure to get as many proposals in each area as we can to help meet this goal. And this just really keeps working towards inclusivity. So the Advising Communities Division, when we think of diversity, we think about how this restructure has really rethought our membership and their interests, where they work, the jobs that they do. We want to make sure that we hit all of their identities. Diversity is really always on our minds. We recently had a smaller task force last year that worked on diversity and how we can increase our diversity and our leadership in the division, our division. We had to slow it down a little because the restructure was quite the process that we're still going through, but we're getting ready to pick that back up because we want to make sure that in addition to representing all these different elements that, just to be frank, when you look at pictures, you see you in some form. And so that's pretty much all for my area. Thank you. Carrie, you can take it away.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. So now we're going to open the discussion to those of you attending today. In order for the process to move smoothly, I'm going to offer a few housekeeping notes. First, as our panelists respond individually to the questions I pose to them, there may be a bit of back and forth as Zoom switches to them on the screen. We apologize in advance for any inconvenience that may create or weirdness to your screen, but we'll do our best with that. And then second, you'll notice that, as we noted earlier, that there's a Q&A box framing the Zoom screen that you see. So please enter any questions you have into that question box. I'll be moderating and opening them to our panelists. A few things to note about this format. In some cases, we may collate similar questions into a single reframed question for our panelists. Also, we may not get to your specific question today, but please know that the board and the executive office are committed to respond to every question and comment. You'll note that the event page on the NACADA website, where you can find the archived recording of our first virtual town hall, also includes a link to a PDF of responses to questions raised in that town hall. President Sanis shared that link to this page in her Friday with NACADA message earlier today. Third, questions and responses will continue until about the final 5 to 10 minutes of our scheduled time today. So, you know, like I said, unfortunately, we can't stay in forever, but we'll do our best to get as many of these in as we can. And then finally, if you have questions but don't feel comfortable posing them in this format or having them answered live, Shannon alluded to the fact that there is a link to the Google form on the event page for this webinar. Please note that you don't have to have a Google account to enter responses on. So this is a way to enter your comments asynchronously. Okay, so I'm going to pose our first question to our panel that I see here. At the town hall in St. Louis, one of the challenges to engagement and leadership that was expressed was that leadership seems to be constituted by those with the means and the institutional support to show up at the NACADA big events like annual conference. Do you have any thoughts on how we as an organization can begin to address this challenge?
I don't, can I answer first? Can I be the first official? So I feel very comfortable answering this because I am at a very small institution, about 3,200 this semester. And quite frankly, most faculty, we are mostly faculty advising. So if I get to go, I'm fortunate, and I get to go because of the leadership roles. But I would say that events like this are key to those of us that can't go to every event doing NACADA involvement, being involved in NACADA. So it's important, I think we're very aware of it. It's been brought up in multiple meetings and discussions that we need to be aware and really careful about making sure that everyone can be involved, whether or not they can attend annual, because it's pricey and not all of us get that support. I will also do a little shout out for the regions because they're much more affordable. If you're brand new to the association, maybe it's a little bit more accessible for you, less intimidating. I don't know, it's not intimidating to me, but maybe it's more accessible for you. My first conference for NACADA ever was actually Region 7 in Branson, Missouri. So I know we're making real efforts. We try to do as much as we can digitally, but it is something that I feel needs to constantly be reevaluated. And Karen's also at a smaller school, so I know she's aware.
But I would like to jump in. I think there's really two things in this question. And one is about how do you get involved if you can't come to the annual? And the other piece is how does the association support those who want to be in leadership positions but don't have the funding? And I think that the second part of it is something that the board is working on for this year in terms of the potential of funding and support for those who are into elected positions. And that's in the works right now. And I think that that's an incredibly important piece of it, but that is obviously prohibitive in terms of cost. So just as ELP has funding behind it, the Emerging Leaders program has funding behind it, it can't fund everyone. So I think the other piece of the question is about how do people get involved if they can't go to the annual conference. And I think certainly Rebecca's comments about region is one, but it's also about how we define leadership. And at NACADA, we do define leadership very broadly and think about it in terms of how are you able to review proposals? Are you able to write for the association? Are you able to be involved in any number of other volunteer things? As Rebecca mentioned, events like this that are taking place from your home, but you can also be a leader from your home institution. You can do a lot of things that are available to you without having to make it to annual. And I think that one of the most important things that NACADA has done is in defining the difference between elected leadership and leadership. And often elected leadership might mean needing to get to the annual conference, but leadership in this organization is not limited to those people. And I think one of the focuses that we need to do is to do a better job of really highlighting those people who are leaders in those ways that we talk about, but maybe don't get seen as frequently.
I'd like to chime in too, kind of bridging both of those things that Rebecca and Karen both mentioned in terms of how we're using Zoom as a platform for meetings. I know at least in the admin division, I would guess across the association with all of our groups, and our meetings are open both at the annual conference, but also in these Zoom platforms. And so that is one way that individuals can get involved with committees, with advising communities, with advisory boards. If you want to sit in and learn about what we are doing and get actively involved as a member of one of those groups as well, I would encourage individuals to reach out to those groups that they might be interested in. Contact information is available on the website for each of those groups, for who the chair is and other members, so we can get you included and involved in that work that we're doing, because a lot of our meetings happen in this platform as well, not just at annual conference, at regional conferences. And so I think that's a good way to bridge what both of you are saying, and how we get involved that can go across the time span and geographical span of our membership.
I'm going to jump in here with another question. Someone asked about the current percentage of leadership and membership that is made up by diverse identity groups. And I think we've got a couple of potential resources that we might be able to share related to that. But Shannon, maybe do you want to reference a few things?
So if you're wanting to know what some of the statistics and data is around kind of our membership, our leadership numbers within the organization, President Sanis, in her article in Academic Advising Today, just this past December, so a month ago, did write an article around diversity and inclusion, and it does include those statistics. And we can share that piece with you if you would like.
Sorry for the dead air there. I had a few technical difficulties. Charlie might have something to add related to this topic as well.
Yeah. Well, while we wait for to see whether we could share that, Amy also sent some of those figures out this morning in her Friday to NACADA email that went to all members. So I encourage you to look at that, and then also look at her article in the AAT in December. But in response to the first question, Carrie, one of the things I think that we want to make people aware of is that President Sanis has set up a task force that is looking this year at finding financial resources to support those from unrepresented areas that may be interested in running for leadership but don't have the financial support of their campuses. So we'll be making the members aware of that task force work as it moves forward during this year, and have some responses later in the year on what we might be able to do. Thank you.
Screenshot of Amy's article, and can hopefully get a chance to reference that. Okay, so here's another question for you. When considering inclusion engagement at sites that are uncomfortable discussing these topics, how will and how can the association support efforts of individuals to create change on their campuses? So I think the question is really coming at this from how do we support campuses with the difficult conversation.
I do think one way, Carrie, is we've had several webcasts that have been on the topic of inclusion and engagement. I think getting copies of those to help provide a guided discussion, and those can be found on our website. In addition, an institution can utilize the Dakota Consultants Bureau to bring in a consultant to help guide such a conversation on their campus as well that would provide them that assistance.
I will also say, oh, I'm sorry, Karen, you go ahead.
Go ahead. I actually suspect you and I might say something similar, which is that the many of the advising communities are focused on areas of diversity and inclusion. And so the leadership of those groups, not only the elected chairs, but also the steering committees, are great sources of information to support how folks can create that change on their campus. As an example, there is a group that has done Safe Zone training and has been really focused on how to translate that from a NACADA conversation to a campus-based conversation. And my experience with the formerly CIG, now Advising Communities group, is that those groups as a whole are very focused on how to support others in having those conversations. So I think there are a number of different arenas in which you can find that support.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. I actually exist on a campus where the conversations are difficult and I didn't know where to turn. So I went to NACADA, I went to a Safe Zone training that one of the commissions was hosting, and now I'm a Safe Zone facilitator on my campus and actually regionally as well. And it's been completely, I mean, NACADA is the only reason, and that commission chair is the only reason that I am able to do it, and I think that's directly impacted, I know it has, my campus. We have 40 plus Safe Zone allies on campus now. Went from 0.
There was a question came in that asked us to reiterate, Cecilia, the new peer-reviewed publication that you referenced. Can you call that out again?
Yeah, absolutely. So the name of it's the NACADA Review, Academic Advising Praxis and Perspectives. That hasn't been published yet, but the editors have been identified. And so you'll be seeing that, more information about that coming out shortly as we develop those articles, but I know that's in progress right now.
At our last town hall, and I think this may be a question for Charlie, but I would invite maybe Karen or Shannon to jump in on this as well. There was a lot of talk about the John Gardner Institute and you know, our new partnership with them, and I'm wondering a bit about how that relationship can maybe foster you know, some of what was just discussed around helping to provide support for those broader campus conversations about equity and inclusion, and maybe by proxy help you know, having the representative leadership that we need to represent all of our members. So I don't know if anyone wants to take that on.
I'll be glad to, Carrie. If anyone had a chance to watch any of the informational webcasts you saw, but in case you have not, if you go to the Dakota website and look at the EAA link on there, you will see the 9 conditions for excellence in academic advising. One of those is specifically inclusion and diversity, so that when an institution is involved in the EAA process and goes through that 2-year audit of their campus, one of the major pieces that campuses will be asked to look at is how academic advising is being utilized to focus on inclusion and diversity of students as well as advisors at all levels. We also are working very hard and very diligently that the first 12 charter institutions will represent all institutional types to bring inclusion into the types of institutions involved in our charter institutions in the first cohort.
Thank you, Charlie. Another question came through about, Rebecca, you had referenced one of the things that you're pushing for the advising communities is to around proposals to the annual conference. And, there was a question about, getting involved with that, but also wondering if you might want to elaborate on the role maybe that advising communities play in helping to shape the annual conference program. We get that question and concern a lot about why aren't there more presentations about X, or why aren't there more presentations about Y?
So that's a great question. I'm happy to talk about it. I know I'm a division rep, but I actually just volunteered to read for small colleges and universities for their advising community, because it's an easy way to be involved from my computer or even in my PJs if I want to. So basically what happens is a whole bunch of proposals get submitted by lovely advisors and such. And it is then up to the advising communities who get the proposals kind of parsed out to them. And the readers, who are volunteers, they don't get really, they get the experience, but there's nothing, there's no money or anything, but they volunteer to do it. And they read through the proposals and see which, really it has a rubric, which ones fit the needs and how they're written and things like that. And then from there, that clump of proposals that have been moved on go to the chair of that group. And then after that to the conference committee. But I think it's key. We are working really hard because Dawn, we were meeting and chatting the other day. Dawn's the liaison for my division, Dawn Krause. She's fantastic. And she was saying that there are, I don't know if I'm going to remember this right, but thousands of proposals submitted and 500 and some readers. So that just, those people, we always need readers. And it's so easy, but it is key because it shapes the conference. The quality of the proposals and the presentations that are accepted, that is a direct result of the work of these readers and the advising communities. And we are eternally grateful for them. And I continue to do it because I know it's not easy always finding readers. So it is key. They read both for their content area. So they would, for example, advising students with disabilities would read for that. But the way that the submission process is, they can also be reading for something that might be a little less directly related to them. But like I told them before, it's really convenient because that's outsider eyes reading the proposal and saying, hey, is this really important? Is this really good? Can I really understand it? I'm hoping that answers it. Carrie, do you think? Okay.
Can I actually add just one comment?
She's an expert.
We go off of that. Is actually that it's not quite on the proposal piece, but on Carrie's comment earlier that we often hear from folks that there aren't enough proposals on X. And I think one of the things as a new professional or as a newer professional, I think sometimes we can have that feeling that I'm looking for the expert and we can forget that we are the experts. And so I would encourage everyone, whether it's at a local or regional or at the annual level, to think about the fact that when you are saying, I wish there was a presentation on whatever, that's something that it could be you as the source. And I think when folks also think about how new members get involved, that's one of the best ways to do it, is to say, I recognize that I am a content expert, because every one of us is a content expert in something. And think about how that can translate into helping to bring some of those topics that we might not regularly see at an annual conference or regional, seeing those kinds of presentations being front and center. And I think some of this past annual, we saw a number of presentations that wouldn't have been and they were around inclusion and diversity that wouldn't have been an annual just a few years ago. So I think so much of that is in showing up.
We're going to try to send out specific contact information for volunteering for the conference. I know that Amy included that in her Fridays with NACADA meeting, but we'll try to get it out in the chat. Here's an oh, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks,
Hi,
Amy.
everybody. Yes. Actually, the annual conference committee is really interested in, they're really looking forward to finding some readers for their proposals. And so there are, in the email that went out this morning, there are a list of 3 different conference committee chairs that are looking for readers. So please, Luis, I see you asked that. Please volunteer. They would love to have you help out. There's also the conference committee. Katie Reese writes a NACADA blog, and that should be coming out here pretty soon. And that also gives more information about proposal readers and how to volunteer. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. There's a question that came in about NACADA and specific plans to outreach to underrepresented advisors from populations like Native American populations or other populations of color, where maybe we don't have as many members and as much engagement in NACADA. Are there specific plans for support for those folks and engagement within leadership? And I know, Michelle, you kind of alluded to that a little bit in your discussion of the IEC, but any additional thoughts on that?
So I feel like we're at the point, and I have to acknowledge we're at the point where, I mentioned our data subcommittee, and looking at the data that we currently have, we feel it is incomplete. And so part of that is being able to, one, identify advisors from underrepresented groups, but in doing so, we're limited by those that are involved in NACADA. So if there are other advisors from underrepresented groups, specifically the question was on Native Americans, and they're not engaged in the association, I would be interested to know information on how to engage them. And so that's part of our data gathering stage that we're going to come into in the near future to understand what are the groups that we are targeting well, and others that we are missing. And I believe there was another question about continuing specific conversations. So we want to know that information in order for our group, the IEC, to move forward with specific and targeted discussions, interventions, programs, with the support of the board and conversations with them. We have to have the information. And so hopefully, if anybody wants to follow up with me, they can definitely do that, but I will be in communication with the board of directors as far as initiatives moving forward, especially our plan to assess the inclusivity and equity within the association this upcoming year.
Karen,
Carrie, if I could.
Yeah, please. Yeah, Charlie, please jump in.
I keep in touch each year with the governmental agency that oversees all the tribal colleges and send them NACADA information regularly, as well as get their list of their administrators at all their institutions. They don't have list as far down as advisors, but they do have the administrators. So I send letters annually and twice a year to the administrators of tribal colleges, inviting them to the county event, sending them information on the webcast, and those such a thing. So we do reach out to them, but trying to get the list of the specific advisors on the campuses is something that I'm still trying to work with through those presidents and other chief administrators on those campuses.
Thanks, Charlie. Karen, I was just going to ask too, if from your vantage point of working with the council, if you've seen anything come up through the regions related to that notion. Do regions have specific goals in terms of reaching out to underrepresented advising populations?
I think the regions as a whole, and if someone has a car alarm going out in the background, you can mute. So thank you. Maybe. So when it comes to the regions, I think one of the great things about the regions is that they are very locally focused. So they're very aware of the nature of their the kinds of organizations, the kinds of institutions that are within their region. So what regional outreach might look like in terms of institutional type, particularly with HBCUs or HSIs or tribal colleges, is going to look different from region to region, because certain regions have large numbers of those institutions and other regions have very few. So I think when you're looking at some of the regions that have large numbers of tribal colleges, it's certainly the case that their regions are working on engagement, just as it's true that in, for example, I'll give an example from my own region. I'm a Region 2 person, and for a number of years there was specific outreach to HBCUs to try to increase the number of advisors from HBCUs who were members. So looking less at what our membership currently is and more at, we have underrepresented institutions, so let's get more membership from them. And we had scholarship connected with that, scholarship dollars rather connected with that for membership. And I think those kinds of things absolutely happen on the region level in a way that is very focused on what a particular region sees as representation or underrepresentation in its area.
A couple of examples of that, Carrie, is Region 6 has held one of the region conferences actually at a Native American casino several years ago to reach out, and it was a wonderful event. And since then, we've seen an increase in the Native American involvement in Region 6. Region 4 this year, just this past year, held its regional conference at HBCU in Mississippi, Jackson State University. So I think Kieran's right. The regions are reaching out as very strongly to those specific types of institutions to get them involved with possibly hosting region conferences or providing scholarships in those ways. So the regions are, I think, doing a good job of reaching out and will continue to grow to do so, I know.
Thanks, Charlie. So folks, I just want to remind you too, if you put forward a question, some of our panelists have actually answered them directly. And so if they've done that, you will actually see them if you click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So I'm going to come back around to the difficult conversations questions that we had earlier and bring up another one that talks about this from a campus advising team perspective. So, you know, if advising teams aren't quite in a place where they're willing or able to have these difficult conversations, are there suggestions or ways that they can at least get the ball rolling and sort of gradually move into the challenging conversations about inclusion and engagement as it relates to academic advising?
I'm wondering if go ahead, Shannon.
Okay. So sometimes I think when we're dealing with issues of diversity and inclusion on our campus, we forget that as advisors, we also have some ability, some authority to be able to affect that change on our campus positively. And so for an example, when I worked with our student veterans here at Michigan State as an advisor, I noticed that our student veterans were really having trouble figuring out their place in the university community and finding the resources that they needed. And I went out as an advisor and sought out options for them to find where those resources were, to learn what they needed as a community, and to help start making some of that change on campus. They were very small changes, but it eventually, I guess the snowball kept growing, and now we have a Veterans Resource Center here on campus. NACADA has some great resources for advisors looking to affect change and start some of those difficult conversations on their campus around inclusion and equity. The first is the social justice webinar that was done in 2015, and that is available for free to NACADA members. And this last year, we published a social justice pocket guide to help our advisors learn how to kind of start building that skill set in themselves to start learning how to negotiate those difficult conversations. I'd also really urge you to reach out to your resources on your campus, whether it's an Office of Inclusion, your Resource Center for Persons with Disabilities, whatever the case might be. Those offices are also great places to start saying, okay, how do I start to have these conversations with colleagues who might not be ready to have these conversations? And then to go back to throwing it back to the advising communities as well, reaching out to our advising communities on those specific topics or populations and say, hey, this is what we're struggling with on our campus. How can we better connect with you so that I can support my colleagues and ultimately my students in having these types of conversations?
Yeah, for my school, the webinar, because I didn't know how to broach topics that are difficult. So we started with a NACADA webinar, which was very, wasn't an opportunity to just yell back and forth. So we just sat there and watched, and that was the precursor to, are you interested in being a safe zone ally? And we moved forward. And the same thing with cultural awareness training.
Carrie, I've just formed a work team that Michelle Smith-Ware is a part of, which is going to be working on building a curriculum, full-fledged curriculum across the board on helping advisors working specifically with disadvantaged students on their campuses. And that workforce, which work team chaired by Blaine Harding and Yolanda Williams, I know will also be developing material that not only will help advisors in working with those students on their campuses, but hopefully provide some guidance on how campuses can begin to have those types of conversations on their campuses as well. And that curriculum will include everything from webinars to pocket guides to workshops. We're just beginning the process, but I'm very excited about that group and very thankful Michelle has agreed to serve on that work team.
That is exciting. I'm excited to see what comes from that. I think there will be some really valuable resources. So I want to acknowledge the fact that we are at about 10 till, so I think we're going to work towards the process of wrapping this up. And I just want to start by thanking our panelists for sharing their time and perspective with us today, and want to thank all of you for joining in on the live town hall webinar and for your great questions. Your input and participation is very valuable to the board of directors, as well as the advising community. Very soon you will receive a link to the recording of this town hall to view again if you choose, or share with your colleagues if they weren't able to attend today. And our hope is that as you continue to reflect and provide additional, or think about this, that you're able to provide additional feedback through the Google form that both Shannon and I have mentioned over the next several days. This form is going to be open until February 2nd, 2018, and so that feedback is vital to us and most welcome. So thank you again for your participation, and I also hope that you're able to join us for our next town hall. We're planning on that for Friday, February 16th, and our topic is going to be NACADA's global initiatives. So with that, I think we will say farewell, and thanks again for being here.
Carrie, if I could jump in one moment before Gary turns it off, and I just want to thank you and Shannon so much for guiding these and coordinating these. We deeply appreciate what you and Shannon have done. I want to thank Amy Sanders as our president, who took your idea at the board meeting in November and in October and said run with it, and then the work Dana Sahoric did last year with getting our strategic goals moving forward and the town hall format that we're copying here virtually. But Shannon and Carrie, you're doing a great job, and we deeply appreciate all that you two are doing and want to thank you publicly.
Thanks so much, Charlie.